In the news tonight, His Majesty the King and the U.S. President discussed an immediate cessation of hostilities and a durable ceasefire in Gaza, as well as the risks to the region from the Islamic State and other terrorist groups. The Iraqi Defense Ministry releases video of airstrikes on locations of Islamic State militants in the Anbar province west of the country and said war jets were used in the attacks. And Israel launches 30 aerial attacks on the Gaza Strip, killing at least 5 Palestinians in a second day of violence since Egyptian-mediated talks failed to extend a 72-hour truce. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty the King discussed with U.S. President Barack Obama the grave situation in the region, namely the need for an immediate cessation of hostilities and a durable ceasefire in Gaza. In a phone conversation late yesterday, His Majesty and Obama reviewed ways to increase support to civilians in Gaza and facilitate humanitarian aid into the enclave. His Majesty cautioned of the repercussions of Israel's aggression, saying it would only increase tensions in the region, and urged the revival of peace negotiations that deal with final status issues to end the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. King Abdullah also briefed Obama on Jordanian efforts to reach a resolution that would end hostilities, lift the siege, and lead to the process of reconstruction in the Gaza Strip. The King and Obama also discussed the risks to the region from the Islamic State and other terrorist groups that strive on fueling sectarian disputes in the Middle East, as well as the importance of supporting an inclusive political solution in Iraq. The two leaders also reaffirmed the strong friendship and strategic partnership between Jordan and the United States and agreed to maintain coordination and consultations on various issues. Separately, Obama told reporters in Washington that U.S. airstrikes in Iraq have destroyed arms and equipment that Islamic State insurgents could have used to attack Erbil. However, he warned the current operation in Iraq is going to be a long-term project. Obama said the United States would continue to provide military assistance and advice to the Baghdad government and Kurdish forces, but stressed repeatedly the importance of Iraq forming its own inclusive government. Obama spoke to reporters before leaving on holiday with his family.
Pilots and crews have served with courage and skill in the skies over Iraq. First, American forces have conducted targeted airstrikes against terrorist forces outside the city of Erbil to prevent them from advancing on the city, and to protect our American diplomats and military personnel. So far, these strikes have successfully destroyed arms and equipment that ISIL terrorists could have used against Erbil. Meanwhile, Kurdish forces on the ground continue to defend the city, and the United States and the Iraqi government have stepped up our military assistance to Kurdish forces as they wage their fight.
Meanwhile, Iraq's Ministry of Defense released a video showing recent airstrikes targeting locations of Islamic State militants in Anbar province west of the country. The ministry said war jets were used in the attack, and in a video a rocket can be seen hitting a target. The Ministry of Defense also released video it said shows C-130 aircraft dropping aid to Iraqi Yazidis fleeing Islamic State insurgents' advances in their home areas. The IS are now encroaching on Erbil, seat of the Kurdish region's government, its parliament, and now temporary home to scores of refugees who have fled other parts of Iraq. The UN Security Council is negotiating a draft resolution to tackle Islamic State militants by financially weakening the group, stopping a flow of foreign fighters and threatening sanctions on those who recruit and help them. The British drafted resolution would condemn direct or indirect trade with Islamic State and Al-Qaeda's Syrian wing Nusra Front and warns of sanctions on those who do. It urges states to submit names of individuals and entities believed to support the group. Britain initially aimed to adopt the resolution by the end of the month, but accelerated its plan after Islamic State fighters surged towards Erbil. Now the resolution could be adopted later this week. The group has executed non-Sunni Muslim captives, displacing tens of thousands of people. This report looks at the plight of minority Yazidis who've fled their homes to Mount Sinjar, north of Iraq.
Mount Sinjar in northern Iraq. It's to this desert mountaintop that tens of thousands of minority Yazidis have fled and now scramble for humanitarian aid. Sunni militants from the Islamic State had ordered them to convert or die. The militants have beheaded and crucified some of their captives in their drive to eradicate unbelievers and other minorities like Christians. Some 4,000 Christians from a nearby province have fled the fighting. They've taken refuge at this church in central Arbil, the horror still fresh in their minds.
We don't need anything, we just need a solution. We want to return to our homes and die there. Let them kill us. Or we want a solution. The children are dying.
But church walls can't guarantee their safety. The militants have advanced to only a half-hour's drive from Arbil. The U.S. has called the persecution of these minorities a genocide.
Many of my family are still trapped there. Why? Why can't we reach a solution? All my relatives are there waiting. What have we done to deserve this?
World attention is focused on the plight of the Yazidis and other minorities in northern Iraq. This in an area that for centuries has been one of the most diverse places in the entire Middle East.
Over to the Gaza Strip, where Israel launched more than 30 aerial attacks, killing at least 5 Palestinians in a second day of violence since Egyptian-mediated talks failed to extend a 72-hour truce. Clouds of dust and rubble blasted into the air by explosions as Israel continued to strike at positions in the enclave. One attack reduced a security complex belonging to Hamas to a huge cloud of smoke. In other strikes, which lasted through the night, 3 houses were bombed while fighter planes strafed open areas. Gaza fighters, meanwhile, fired rockets at towns in southern Israel, setting off alarm sirens. And while the Egypt-backed talks have made no visible progress towards resuming the ceasefire, Egypt is expected to pursue its diplomacy. Both Hamas and Israel remain apart on terms for renewing the ceasefire, with each blaming the other for refusing an extension. And in the West Bank, hundreds of Palestinians held a funeral procession for a man killed yesterday during clashes with Israeli soldiers near Ramallah. Ahmed al-Qutri, aged 20, was shot dead by Israeli troops at a protest near a Jewish settlement outside Ramallah. With the ongoing fighting in Gaza, violence also surged in the occupied West Bank. In Hebron, residents buried Nader Idris, 43, who died of a gunshot wound to the chest from a confrontation with Israeli soldiers also yesterday. An Egyptian court dissolved the Freedom and Justice Party, the political wing of the banned Muslim Brotherhood, the country's oldest Islamist movement. The court's ruling, which is final and cannot be appealed, also called for assets of the party to be seized by the state. The party's lawyer called the ruling political and said it is unconstitutional to deprive the defense of the right to appeal. In September, a court banned the Muslim Brotherhood, but that ruling did not mention its political wing, leaving open the possibility it could be allowed to run in parliamentary elections due later this year. Turks are preparing to head to the polls tomorrow to elect a new president in first direct presidential elections that Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan is widely expected to win. Representing the Justice and Development Party, Erdogan will be running against scholar Ekmelettin Ihsanoglu and the Kurdish politician Salahuddin Demirtas, who is the co-chair of the Democratic People's Party. A survey conducted by a Turkish pollster put Erdogan on more than 55% of the vote, with Ihsanoglu predicted to gain 33%. If no candidate wins more than 50% in the first round of the election, a runoff vote will be held on the 24th. Alitalia and Etihad Airways signed an agreement in Rome that will see the Gulf airline buying nearly half of Italy's flagship carrier in a last-ditch effort at keeping the loss-making company flying. Etihad, owned by Abu Dhabi, will buy almost half of Alitalia, thus acquiring a 49% stake in it and pour $751 million into Alitalia. The two airlines have been in talks for 8 months, and a final agreement was held up by tough negotiations over thousands of job cuts and an Alitalia debt restructuring demanded by Etihad Airways as a condition for the deal. A marriage with Etihad could bring Alitalia money to invest in more profitable long-haul routes and make it less reliant on domestic and regional services. And while the deal brought smiles, officials were aware of the sacrifices that come with the deal.
I would also like to thank all those who unfortunately, and we are very sorry about it, will have to leave Alitalia. They will be moving to other employment. We are sorry, but we are aware that to create a future, development and opportunities, sometimes you need to make painful decisions. We are doing this to create a future.
Ma lo facciamo per creare un futuro. Grazie a tutti.
Alitalia is a good airline. It's a strong airline in regard to passenger carrying, and it has a good fit with Etihad. But for a range of reasons, historically, it's a poor business financially. And when you're a poor business financially, it's very difficult to reinvest. You get in a cycle of continually looking backwards instead of looking forwards. So there's no quick fix. So we've put together a 3-year plan with the Alitalia management team to move the airline back to profitability by 2017.
As the Nigerian government looks for ways to curtail the spread of the Ebola virus currently threatening the nation, many people have taken to social media sites to make jokes about the disease and suggest alternative ways of avoiding it. Social media users have been sharing pictures of the Ebola hug, the Ebola handshake and the Ebola kiss, all carried out using protective clothing and gloves. Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan declared a national state of emergency yesterday over the Ebola outbreak and approved $11.7 million of emergency funds to contain the disease. The country has confirmed 7 cases in its commercial capital Lagos since a man fell sick on arrival from Liberia. 2 people have died of the disease. Several dozen people who came into contact with the man are under surveillance. The World Health Organization says West Africa's epidemic constitutes an international health emergency, and the virus, which has killed nearly 1,000 people, could continue spreading for months. In a parade dedicated to the 90th anniversary of the first bus route in Moscow, retro buses have taken a ride through the center of the city, receiving a warm welcome from the public. The retro buses included the oldest bus driving through Moscow streets, the last remaining of its kind, made in 1936. The parade passed through city landmarks, finishing at Sakharov Avenue, where the buses were put on display. During the exhibition, people had a chance to get on buses, to sit inside and even behind the wheel. Some visitors said the event brought back the memories of their youth. The first regular bus route in Moscow was opened in 1924 and was about 8.5 kilometers long. Today there are 668 bus routes in the Russian capital, which covers 7,000 kilometers of roads. Germany's Philipp Koster and Spain's Daida Moreno won the windsurfing Wave World Cup in Tenerife. The wave discipline is the crown jewel of the windsurfing games. Competitors go head-to-head or in heats of up to 4 at a time, taking on some tough waves. 2-time world champion Koster won the single elimination, but Frenchman Thomas Traversa won the double elimination to pile on the pressure. But in the super final, Koster beat the Frenchman with a very consistent performance. Victor Fernandez Lopez of Spain came third. Munich fans had something to cheer about when their team was presented to a sold-out stadium ahead of the start of the new Bundesliga season. Some 65,000 fans gathered in the Allianz Arena in Munich to watch the players come onto the pitch and take part in a training session for them to see their skills in action. Many of the players in this year's squad were part of Germany's World Cup winning team. The only players not to take part were Thiago and Frank Ribery, both whom are injured. Bayern's first Bundesliga match of the season will be on the 22nd at home to Wolfsburg. And finally, a quick look at the weather forecast. Continues to be fair tonight in most parts of the kingdom with northwesterly moderate winds. Tomorrow, a slight rise in temperature is expected, but normal summer conditions prevail in most regions with a high of 31 degrees Celsius in Amman, while winds will be northwesterly light to fresh. The Gulf of Aqaba can expect hot conditions with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. His Majesty the King and the U.S. President discuss an immediate cessation of hostilities and a durable ceasefire in Gaza, as well as the risks to the region from the Islamic State and other terrorist groups. The Iraqi Defense Ministry releases video of airstrikes on locations of Islamic State militants in the Anbar province west of the country and said war jets were used in the attack. And Israel launches 30 aerial attacks on the Gaza Strip, killing at least 5 Palestinians in a second day of violence since Egyptian-mediated talks failed to extend a 72-hour truce. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Z.Toukan. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night.